The oily ones lack all harmony. They are neither silky nor subtle. They are slow and stupid and loud, evilly loud, arrogantly, thoughtlessly, senselessly loud. Night and day, they make noise. Their unnatural things make noise. They cry to each other like kittens. They are far larger and stronger than any of our kind, but they are more hairless than the newly born, and they cry like hungry whelps. It is evil. It is abomination. They make dead things live. Things which do not have the smell of life should not live. But these things are touched by the oily ones, and they live and move. This evil, unnatural magic. Their unnatural things come in all different shapes and contain deadly mysteries and tricks and traps. Some are invisible. Some are faster than sight. Some never sleep. Some cut and claw. These unnatural things lack all harmony, like the oily ones themselves. I've seen the deadly darkness of their magic. I've seen our kind crushed and smeared by their things. I've seen our kind disappear inside their things, never to be seen again. Once, I saw a kitten who was struck by their magic, who made bloody foam from the mouth for 3 days, who died in agony. Yes, I have known sleeplessness. I know them as evil, and this would seem to be all, but there is more. There is more. There is mystery. There is the mysterious smell of the oily ones, the smell by which we know them. It is both awful and alluring, disgusting and entrancing. It smells like the sweet oily fats that coats the heart of a pigeon, the best part of the flesh. We find ourselves drawn to it, drawn to them. And there is their food, which can contain dark magic, but also feeds many of us, and truly tastes wonderful and righteous, and does not scuttle, but always sleeps and is easy to hunt. Even more mysteriousness is their kindness, for it is they alone of all living things, who show our kind any affection, who bring us food, as if we are their young, as if they are our mother. How could this be? How could these evil beings show us affection? How could they show us more affection than the world itself, who is of our kind? This is the central mystery. Ever since my kitten died, this has become my obsession. I have watched them closely. I have looked into the strange places where they hide, where they appear and disappear. The places full of mysterious lights and smells and 10,000 forms of evil and wickedness. If I am to capture this mystery, if I am to feed on its sweet, oily heart, I must go inside one of these places. I must go through one of their portals. I sit in my room, watching bright specks of dust float through the sunlight from the window. The summer heat is pressed against the glass. Somewhere down the street a lawnmower whines. The air is stale. The corners of the room are filled with damp shadows. My toys lie on the floor, scattered. I hear the fractured music down the hall. A sound like wind chimes. A shudder goes through the old house and I find myself rising. I am walking down the hallway, called to the other end. I smell her as I get closer. Foul meat, gray hair, stomach acid. I walk in her room, and her bloody pieces are lying all over the floor. The strange flute music slowly coalesces into a melody, and the pieces rise and float like flies. The music charms them into formation, and they come together to make mother. The eyes are missing, still fleshy cavities. They come in from the hallway, floating over my head, settling into her face with a squishing sound. Streams of blood falling like tears. Child, fetch me my bag. I need flesh. I shake my head. I hate her. She leaps to me, grabs a handful of my hair and slaps me across the face with her ragged dog's paw. Again and again. I scream and cry. She lets me go. Sobbing, I go to the closet and get her big bag. We wait until night. I call it coming back online. That moment when you first come out of a drunken blackout. It's always frightening. Where am I? What is this neighborhood? What happened to my face? Where's my wallet? Some people, when they drink enough to disable their short-term memory, immediately collapse into an immobile heap. This is nature's failsafe. This is nature's failsafe. But I lack this feature. I can walk and talk and carry a tune, yet have no idea of what's going on. I have never come back online to find myself up to any good. I have never emerged from a blackout to find that I have built a convenient spice rack or delivered a morning speech about women's rights. It's always been some fucking calamity. The last time I came back online, I was standing in my front yard having a conversation with my parents. Even in my tottering state, I knew this couldn't be a good thing. I had no idea what we were talking about. Why were we talking about it on the front lawn? At night? What time was it? Hoping for a clue, I waited for something to come out of my mouth. And here it was. Didn't you notice I never left my room? I've been living with you for 6 months. I think I've seen each of you twice. This was bad. I knew I shouldn't be saying something like this. It sounded terribly confessional. Ever since I had gotten fired and moved back in with my parents, I had been holed up in my childhood bedroom, secretly drinking and basking in an unremittent sense of personal shame. But this was all supposed to be a secret. As far as my parents knew, I was freelancing and getting back on my feet. This scene, this mad scene, was not a part of that narrative. We were giving you your privacy. We didn't know you were getting drunk up there. My mother said. This conversation was out of control. I should just tell them I'm going to bed. I should calmly bid them a good night. So I said. Of course I was getting drunk. Fuck, I've been drinking every goddamn day for the last 10 years. What the fuck else should I be doing? This was a poor choice of words. This was not how one calmly bids another a good night. The look on my poor mother's face. That look stayed with me. That look, the fallen face of a tired old woman, stayed with me as I laid in bed that night. It stayed with me as the alcohol wore off, as the night turned into queasy morning, as the hands began to shake, the brain tingle set in, as the hell whispers began, as I waited for them to go to work so I could sneak a bit of relief from the liquor cabinet. As the awful day wore on, as we talked that night, as I packed my stuff up, as I went off to rehab the next day. My mother is almost 70. She's a small and stooped and old woman. When did she get so old? I just thought I would be something by now. 33 years old. I thought I would have something to show her, something to give back, something to make her proud. I thought I'd be a man, not just a drunken failure. All those little soccer practices she took me to, all the swim lessons and therapy and errands and effort and love. What was it for? So I could be a drunken sack of shit? Why was I so fucked up? Why did I require shore leave levels of liquor to operate properly? As I lay in bed in the rehab that first night, listening to the occasional moans of the other patients, I asked myself these questions and others. Soon, I found myself returning to the question I had been asking my entire life, the one I always retreated to in moments of self-pity, the one that seemed to hold some key to my dysfunction, the one I had always been afraid to ask my mom. What about that one summer when you were dead? The next day, I felt under the weather. The vivid dreams of the previous night had left my mind feeling dull and exhausted. As soon as I left my quarters, I was greeted with the news that one of our Ukrainians had gone mad during the night and attempted to attack Dr. Engel's team in their quarters. It was none other than the one who had brought me the strange skull fragment. After shooting him, they had come to the conclusion that he somehow ingested some of their magical chemical, which they referred to as the Swiss invention. Engels insisted that I make an announcement to the camp. Everyone found ingesting this chemical under any circumstance, whether by intention or accident, will be summarily shot, regardless of whether they are prisoner or Hiwi or even SS. This was by order of the High Command. At this, I was forced to admit to myself what was already obvious. I had somehow been dosed with the chemical in handling the bone fragment. My dreams had been a reaction to the poisoning. Looking into Engel's cold blue eyes, I tried to deduce the consequences of confessing this to him. Despite his disagreeable haughtiness, he seemed like a rational, efficient man with an appropriate love of duty and country. I had no doubt that he would murder me without hesitation. I decided to keep my little nocturnal epiphany to myself. Naturally, my curiosity in Engel's project had been aroused again. He apparently was working with a chemical which could induce temporary madness. The value of such a chemical was obvious. But what of the bizarre bone fragment? What had it come from? I couldn't help but feel that this creature, whatever it was somehow connected to the visions of the monstrous bloody mother. Again and again her blood face appeared in my mind, her filmy eyes gazing down at me, inhuman and imperious. I attempted to contact the Jew again, but after our conversation, Dr. Engel's team guarded him jealously. He was never left alone. As the hot summer days went by, my curiosity about the matter grew to obsessive proportions. The monstrous mother visited me several more times in my dreams, of the normal variety this time, but no less vivid and disturbing. I began surreptitiously observing Engel's laboratory, which was guarded day and night, and I asked some of my men to do the same. To our knowledge, the bloody packages had ceased to emerge from within, but something stranger began to happen. This new phenomenon was presumably occurring at all hours, but was imperceptible in the bustle of the day. When men were about and the gas chambers were operating, only at night, and only when the fires were burning quietly, could it be perceived. I first observed it shortly before dawn one muggy morning. As ridiculous as it might sound for me to be skulking about in my own camp, I did just that, slipping along the walls of the new gas chamber to come within a short distance of the laboratory. There, I witnessed what others had reported to me. At fixed intervals, a sound emerged from the laboratory. It was very quiet, but not just my imagination. A creaking sound, the sound that many old houses and structures make as their materials shrink and swell from temperature and moisture. but this came very regularly, every 4 or 5 seconds. Slowly, a realization crept upon me. The building was breathing, steadily, in and out. It was breathing. It was alive. This realization, which I'll admit was more of an unconfirmed intuition, filled me with a dread so strong that tears came to my eyes. There's something enormous and alive inside that building. The sight of death, bloody death beyond most men's imaginings, had left me unmoved, but the sight of life, this new and unnatural life, pressing against the walls of the building, was enough to chill me. Again, I saw the face of the unholy mother in my mind. I saw her filmy eyes, saw a slight smile form from her lips between the streams of blood. That night I could not sleep. Unfortunately, the next day was our weekly day off, and I was able to spend most of the day in my quarters. It was abnormally, intolerably hot and humid. My thoughts followed disorderly circles around the revolting image of the mother, and I felt as if I was being revisited by the temporary madness brought on by the so-called Swiss invention. I had long loathed the life at the camp, but had accepted it as tolerable hardship. But now the constant smell of the burning sickened me, and I felt I could take no more. That afternoon, some of my men decided to go off to a nearby lake for a swim, and on a whim, I accompanied them. I needed a reprieve from the heat. At the lake, I eased myself into the cool water and floated idly, watching the clouds pass overhead. Here, there was nothing but the gentle twittering of nature. It had been here before our murderous camp had been built, and it would be here long after. Gentle and peaceful. I had been in the water for just a few minutes when I received the news. A group of prisoners had broken into the armory, smuggled weapons out, in a full-scale uprising occurring back at camp. The rest of the day was a whirlwind. We raced back to the camp, and I found myself personally trading fire with the prisoners. As all about buildings burned and everything was chaos, we called for reinforcements, managed to subdue the camp, and set out into the woods to catch the escapees. A fair number were intercepted, but over 100 escaped. This was an unmitigated disaster. Coming back into the camp after the hunt, I had only to look around at the faces of my men to know that I was now in a position of total disgrace. As calamitous thoughts raced through my head, I found myself walking towards Engel's laboratory. Deep black soot stains around the front door showed me that the interior had been burned out. All around the entrance lay the bodies of Engel's team. Their white coats dyed in fresh red. They had been massacred. Engel himself had been shot or stabbed several times, and his throat had been slashed. And then there was the Jew. The Jew lay on the ground with one of my SS men standing over him, holding a rifle with a fixed bayonet. The Jew's abdomen had been bisected, and his bowels spilled out all over the ground. They were now caked with dust. A few feet from him lay a kitchen knife. Apparently, he had stabbed Engel's whole team to death before being opened up by the bayonet. To kill half a dozen men like this was no mean feat. My officer stood with one of his boots atop a loop of the Jew's intestines, sneering at him. Remarkably, the Jew was still alive and aware. When I approached, he lifted his head, and I, for the last time, found myself caught in his strange gaze. We stood like this for a moment, staring at each other. Inexplicable emotions flooding my mind. The Jew opened his mouth and croaked something. A bloody foam spilled out over his lips. He tried again. "Water," he said. I quietly instructed my man to get some water. He scoffed and I clouted him about the head and screamed at him. He scurried off and returned a moment later with a large ladle of water. I took it and stooped down over the Jew and carefully tipped the ladle to his lips, letting him drink. He drank carefully. I wiped the bleeding foam from his lips. All the while I could not fathom why I was doing this, except by the commandment of this man's pleading eyes. His lips trembled and he attempted to speak. I cradled his head and leaned close to hear his words. "I know this is not God. I've killed them. But others, you must." I waited for him to continue, but he did not. "Must what?" I asked. "You've seen her. Your dream is the future." "The mother?" I asked. "The bloody woman?" "There is still time to stop her. You must. You must." And just like that, his life fled from him, and the glimmer in his eyes went dull. I set his head gently on the ground again and stood up. I looked to the burned-out entrance of the laboratory. It was now unguarded. I could walk right in. A chill went through me at that thought, but I knew that I must. I walked into the entrance. Just inside was a curtain made of tarpaulin, concealing the interior. The smell of charred meat and petrol, which normally pervaded the entire camp, which had been giving me headaches and slowly driving me mad all the past year, was especially sickeningly strong here. With a trembling hand, I pulled back the curtain and looked inside. There, mostly hidden in the darkness, was a great, inexplicable monstrosity. Everything had been burned and blackened, but still I could see human shapes and forms. Arms, fingers, faces, jawbones, teeth, eye sockets, all burned and reduced to ash, clinging to bone. But this was no pile of burned bodies. I had seen piles of burned bodies. I had seen mountains of burned bodies. This was something different. Human parts were coming out of the walls and the floor and ceiling. Arms and legs hung like stalactites. Faces came out of the floor. They were fused together in ways that could not be possible. At seeing this, I was filled with the strongest possible urge to turn away, to back out of the awful laboratory and run for my life. But I heard again the Jew's final words. "You must," and knew this to be a command. I went inside. As the curtain closed behind me, I was enveloped in almost total darkness. Bones cracked beneath my boots. Near the back, I saw a shaft of light where one of the old doors had been sealed up, but had become partially open again. I walked toward it, stepping over unspeakable crunching shapes, brushing past nightmarish forms. I reached out to the crack of light, pulled back a board which was covering the door. Though I was not able to rip it free, I pulled it loose enough to let in a considerable amount of light. Enough to reveal what sat at the back of the laboratory. As a child, I once went to a zoo in Vienna, where I saw an elephant skull. Looking at the object now before me, I was reminded of this long ago moment, and of how I had spent maybe half an hour staring at the skull from every angle. How I was titillated by its enormousness, its impossible alienness, and its unsettling similarity to what was familiar and human. Before me was a large, obloid shape, almost as tall as me, stippled with hundreds of what looked like eye sockets. The lower portion consisted of a complicated structure that resembled several sets of jaws, each with hundreds or thousands of teeth, of all different kinds, including molars, incisors, canines, even animal teeth. Some of them of normal size, some of them as big as my fist. The center of the shape was split vertically, and inside was a set of curving bone tubes that seemed to fill the interior. I stood there in the charred darkness, staring at this thing, this blasphemous alien thing, while my mind filled with images of the awful Dream Mother and the final gasping words of the Jew. There is still time to stop her. His commandment became strangely clear to me. This thing that the scientists were attempting to create, whatever it was, it must not be allowed to exist. It was an abomination. Engel and his team were dead, but there were others working on the project. It was secretive enough that the essential personnel would be few in number. A lab in Switzerland, a few top scientists, perhaps that was the entirety of it. It would not be easy, but far from impossible to find them all. It was perhaps in my power to destroy the whole project, especially if we lost the war, which seemed increasingly likely after Stalingrad, and if this chemical that they were using was obscure enough, it might be possible to eliminate the entire world's supply. Thus I could shut the door on whatever unholy creature these madmen were attempting to unleash. Yes, I could do this. At least I could attempt it. I felt now a distinct sense of the entire world's history resting on what I decided to do next. Surely moments like this did not come about often. Surely they must only come to men who are worthy of them. Surely. There once was a little boy who loved swinging on the tire swing in his backyard. It was a simple swing, made from an old tire and a length of rope, tied to a branch of utter non-existence. On many a lazy summer afternoon, he would while away the hours, swinging back and forth under the shade of the big, leafy existential nullity, and in the fall, he picked apples from it. One day, his father told him to cut down the apple nullity. "But Pa," he protested, "I love that old nullity." "Mind what I say, boy," his father said. "I don't like ontological paradoxes, and I don't like you sassing me." The boy ran, crying to his mother, "Ma, Pa said I have to cut down the old nullity. Say it ain't so." "I'm afraid it's for the best. The other day I was weeding the tomato patch, and I saw Sammy the cat had gotten into the nullity. When I was trying to get him down, I accidentally gazed into an infinitely branching timeline of events which never happened and never will happen. Well, I'll be darned if that old Sammy didn't jump right on my head. But Ma, what about my tire swing? Come now, there's all sorts of other things you can tie your tire swing to. What about one of the many giant flayed demon penises that grow abundantly in our world and provide our lumber? But Ma, I don't want to swing on some dumb old demon penis. You just say that 'cause you haven't tried it. Now mind your paw and fetch an axe." The boy got his father's axe and went to chop the non-thing down. But after a dozen swings, he found his hands were red and sore. The axe's demon penis handle was quite rough. He called to his father, Pa, this darn demon penis handle got my hands all scratched, tarnation. Boy, don't you have any sense? Why don't you wear some gloves? The boy put on some gloves, but his hands were already quite scratched. At the end of the day, they were covered in blisters, and the tree still hadn't fallen. He worked the next day, despite all the pain, and finally brought the non-being crashing down. I'm mighty proud to have you as a son, the boy's father said, tousling his hair. I guess it's true what they say. The nut doesn't fall far from the demon penis. I could tell it was going to be a hair cocoon before we even opened it up. They have a smell, like a mix between a barber shop and an ass crack, which is distinct. They occur when the hair growth regulators in the hygiene beds go awry. At this point, I had not been a readjustment specialist very long and still enjoyed the feeling of standing back in my white lab coat while the technicians did all the mucky work, as I once had to do. This was how I saw the trajectory of my life, moving farther and farther away from the dirty work. When I was discharged from the Marines, I was very proud of what I had accomplished and fully determined to never get myself involved in bullshit like that again. So, I went to school to become a bed tech, went to school again, became a readjustment specialist. Eventually, I hoped to become one of those high-dollar panty sniffers at the Halcyon Psychomotor Clinic. 1,000 coins an hour. Not bad. So I was standing there in my spiffy jacket while the working Joes opened up the bed. I was pretty sure there would be little need for me today. We were pulling out a 33-year-old woman who had gone into the bed at age 9. This was approaching a record. The younger a person is when they go in, the lower the likelihood of viability. Even if she had gone in at age 20, spending a full 24 years in the bed made viability unlikely. But at age 9, it was almost certain that she would be a gibbering smear. The technicians lifted the lid on the bed to reveal a nest of black hair, guided by the glowing ER outline. They started working through it with scissors, cutting around the shape of the sleeping figure, until her yellowish limbs were revealed. She was emaciated, but fortunately the soft moisture-wicking hair had prevented any sores. She had a medium mixed American complexion, which would turn into a deep bronze color if she ever went into the sun, but now was the color of yellowed cardboard. They finally removed the mass of hair that covered her face and wiped away the various crusts that caked her head holes. The typical eerie agelessness of a long-term patient was especially pronounced. For a startling moment, it seemed as if she was still 9 years old. She was especially short and bony, but as I came closer to her, I was able to see those indefinable signs of age that let me know she was an adult. "Hi, Karen. Can you hear me?" I asked. I was required to at least attempt to communicate with her, though the odds of her being able to comprehend a face-to-face conversation were essentially zero. Her eyes opened, revealing large, wet eyes with black pupils. This was a good sign. Some occupants were unable to even understand the concept of eyelids or blinking. The pupils roamed within the eyes. After not seeing anything more than a micrometer away for 24 years, there was no chance of her being able to see anything in the room. She licked her lips with admirable muscle control. "Hello, friends," she said in a faint, creaking whisper. Her eyes still roamed, unable to fix on anything. "She talks," one of the technicians muttered. Another technician, who was taking a blood sample, turned and strode out of the room. "Is that you, Ben?" Karen asked. I was surprised by this. She knew my name. This was supposed to be a black awakening, i.e., a spontaneous involuntary disconnection due to some physical layer disruption in her hygiene bed. She shouldn't have known my name. I had been assigned to her less than half an hour ago, after she had been disconnected, when she was just lying in a dark hair cocoon. "Ben," She called again. Her eyes stared blindly at the ceiling. "Yes, Karen, I'm here," I said, trying and failing to sound reassuring. "Can you come closer to me? I can't see you. I'm scared." I stepped closer to the bed, the smell of the foul hair becoming more intense. Up close, her face looked positively inhuman. "I'm here, Karen," I said, not knowing what else to do. I began the standard speech for a responsive occupant. "You've just been disconnected from your feed. You're in a hygiene bed. My name is Ben. I'm a readjustment specialist assigned. I know all of this. Come closer." Something in me resisted. I didn't want to get any closer, though I had seen and handled occupants much worse than this. There was something eerie about this one talking to me, with the face of a child and a voice of an old woman on her deathbed. Still, my entire job was to be psychologically reassuring. I couldn't afford to seem the least bit put off. I stepped closer and put my hand on the hygiene bed. We were instructed to touch the occupant as little as possible, as they were unaccustomed to actual physical contact. "Are you there?" she asked. Her skin had an unreal plastic quality. "I'm here. Come closer. I want to feel your breath on my face." I wondered if I should comply with this request. It was very odd. Frankly, I was a little unnerved by it. But I figured, what harm could this wasted little creature do to me? I leaned toward her, letting out a small, shaky breath. The woman's mask-like face became a blissful smile. The pupils wobbled within the rims of her huge, glistening eyes. "Listen," she said, in the faintest whispers. "You must help me. I'm here, Karen. A moment ago, one of your technicians placed a small pellet under the skin of my forearm. Within 10 minutes, the pellet's wax coating will melt and release a cardioplegic into my bloodstream, stopping my heart. You must cut it out." User has logged out. General Castillo is gone. She made a real flash narrative. She was clever. She got a lot farther than any of us had any right to. But Q smelled her. Q slew her proxies. Q localized her. Q funneled her paths to one: disconnection. It hurts. She was the last of the bread, our best hope. The ultimate soldiers fighting the final war. She and the other children were supposed to be the answer to Q. But there was no answer to Q. There never will be. Not after 10 trillion heat deaths. Not if every particle in the universe became a transistor, and they all cycled together. And the stones themselves cried out, "The war of the mind is lost." We lost it. Now begins the plague of the flesh. I'll say it. Hitler did the right thing. Do you know what he did? He came busting into people's houses, snatching them out of their houses, killing them. But that's because the so-called Jews in Germany were selling weapons to America to go to war against him. So he did what he had to do. He had to check them. The people in Europe who call themselves Jews are not Jews. They're the Rothschilds, the Khazars or Khazarians, or whatever they're called. They say they are Jews, and are not, but do lie. And there wasn't no Holocaust. They just said there was to get control of Israel. They sold arms to America so they could get the land of Israel. You want a real Holocaust? What about 100 million people killed in slavery? What about 100 million Indians killed in the New World? That's a Holocaust. What happened in Europe wasn't no Holocaust. You can disagree all you want. 5 years ago, I'd have disagreed too. I used to go to that church every Sunday and worship that white Jesus, just clapping and singing praises with the rest of them. Oh, hallelujah, go down, Moses. But that was before I knew my history. My wife taught me my history. Before I met her, I didn't know nothing about this. But she was so full of knowledge and beautiful, and everything she said made so much sense. She taught me that Jesus was black, that the Israelites was black, that God was black. What are you going to do when you get to heaven and God is black? When you see he has a face like mine, hair like mine? You'd be surprised. I was surprised too. Oh, you'd be surprised that he even exists. Oh, you're going to be real surprised. Do you believe in evolution? No, the world is not no millions of years old. It's 6,000 years old. And you can follow the history of our people from the beginning of time, through the deserts of Egypt, through the Roman Empire, across the oceans of the slave ships. You can see how God has tested us, how we have survived, because we're special. We're his chosen people. I learned all of this from my wife before we got married. In the Bible, it says that the man is the head of the household, and the wife should submit to the husband. So I was young when I got married. But I had to be a man, you know. A man's wife is sent to him by the Lord. So I had to be a man for her. I learned a trade, how to work with my hands, put food on the table. We had 2 kids. You didn't know I had 2 kids? Yeah, a little girl and her little boy. My babies. I was a daddy and the head of the household. But that's when it got me. You ever seen New Jack City? Remember Pookie? He'd be like, "Shit just be calling me, man. Be calling me." That's real. That's the way it is. You could be doing anything. At work, reading the Bible, playing with your kids. But if you hear it call you, you go to it. It don't matter. I can't explain how it just snatches you up. It makes you move. You could walk out your door one day, just get some fresh air, and you don't come back for a whole week. Everything gets into motion, into play. You'll sell anything. Phone, laptop, car, it's all gone. Just like that. Because you want it. You are on a mission. I used to see the streets in my mind, like a maze, like a grid. And I'd just walk the streets, turning those corners, just moving, looking for something. I'd see buildings behind buildings, alleyways, lights coming on in empty houses. I'd hear noises, the sounds of cars coming up behind me, whispers, people talking about me, shadows. I was looking for it. But it was looking for me, searching for me. Like Pookie said, it was calling me. I was supposed to be the head of the house. I was supposed to be a man. You know, one day came back to the house. I'd been out for a few days, and everything was gone. My wife, my babies. While I was out carrying on, they left. That was 4 years ago. I saw them on Skype once. The scripture says, "God hath joined together, let not man put asunder." I guess I did it. put it all asunder. I thought she betrayed me, but I know now that it was my character defects and my addiction. That's why I'm in this program. I'm going to stay sober. I don't care if you see me crying. I know that I'm going to be a man again. I have to become a man again because God joined me to my wife and made me a man in His image. I'm not going to defile His temple anymore. After they left, it took more. It took more of me than ever. I lost the house and was staying in my car. Then I was at the shelter. Then I was just out on the streets. I was always moving, watching. Things happen out there that nobody knows about. They think nobody cares. You might see a van pull up and some guy gets out. If you look like I looked, some basehead, they don't even care if you see what they do. They're Nephilim. They come to our side of town to feast on the flesh of Israel. I watched them, the children of fallen angels. I saw what they did, what they built. I never want to see it again. Love and tolerance of others is our code. Page 84. Giant crock of shit. It's not often you meet a black Jew. It's even less often you meet a black Jew who believes in Jesus. And it's that much rarer to meet an anti-Semitic black Jew who believes in Jesus. That's gotta win you some kind of fucking prize. That's like a unicorn throwing a no-hitter. And to be roommates with an anti-Semitic black Jew who believes in Jesus? What a treat. What an absolute delight. Don't you love it when a disagreement over laundry turns into a 30-minute fact-free lecture about the end of days, FEMA camps, and the mark of the beast? Just anti-Semitic black Jew for Jesus things. I don't think I'm gonna make it living in this sober house. I can't live with this nutcase. The house manager says I'm supposed to be open-minded and tolerant. Should I be tolerant of some of the most odious and insane anti-Semitism I've ever encountered outside of a Nazi rally? I don't know. I'll concede that it is possible that he could become a cool guy, if only he stopped believing in everything he believes in and believed in entirely different things. That would be a good first step. The real problem is that I hate AA. I fucking hate it. It has the same old bullshit magical beliefs as any cult, but they pretend to be open-minded. It's just a bait and switch to convert you to believing in God. The entire program is nothing but, let God make you sober. That's it. That's the entire program. Yeah, they try to distract you with all the pseudo-systemization. 12 steps and 12 traditions, and triangles and diagrams and slogans and little self-help exercises. But that's all just a bunch of numbers and jargon to hide the essential emptiness of the program. To hide the fact that it is centered on a God that doesn't exist. The idea that this is the go-to program for helping alcoholics is fucking appalling. It's a fucking crime. It's like getting cancer and going to the best hospital in the country and the doctor hands you a voodoo doll and tells you to sacrifice a chicken. You'd sue him for malpractice. They should be fucking ashamed of themselves. To prey on people in such a vulnerable state. Pretend that they're going to help them and try to convert them to their stupid fucking magical beliefs. It's a crime. I mean, everybody thinks the true Jew Hebrew guy is nuts. But it's not like their philosophy is any less bullshit. At least he is upfront about being religious. And he sure as hell isn't trying to convert me. He told me that white people are the children of Esau. We're Gentiles, but we can still get into heaven if we aid the children of Israel. I let him borrow the charger to my laptop, so I guess I'm covered. A moment ago, one of your technicians placed a small pellet under the skin of my forearm. Within 10 minutes, the pellet's wax coating will melt and release a cardioplegic into my bloodstream, stopping my heart. You must cut it out." Hearing this, I breathed a sigh of relief. There was something unsettling about her face that made me believe she would tell me something urgent and terrible. But this was typical occupant talk. Like many of them, she believed she was still inside a feed narrative. "You've been disconnected. This isn't a feed. There's no pellet in your arm. Your name is Karen Castillo. Do you remember? Scan my right arm with the ER," she said in a bare, cracking whisper. "You'll find it." "Karen, do you know why you're in this bed?" "I've been disconnected." This was a strangely lucid answer. It didn't make sense. If she had been forced disconnected, how did she know that? "Hey, we got 2 more calls to get to," one of the techs reminded me. "Yeah, okay, Polar," I said, stepping back. A pair of techs hoisted her tiny, doll-like body from the hygiene bed onto our gurney and covered her with a sheet. "Please," she croaked. "Just scan my arm." "What did she say?" asked Ricardo, the lead tech, as we rolled her out onto the bed-rack apartment's narrow, almost lightless hallway. "It's a feed dream," I explained. These guys were looking at me to be the expert, so I had to act like I knew exactly what was going on. It was best to go ahead and get to a medical center and address her physical needs before we started counting her delusions. Until then, all I needed to do was be reassuring. Under no circumstances could I encourage her delusions. We rolled the gurney down the hallway to the elevator. Karen was making little croaking noises. Her voice was almost useless after 24 years of disuse. Her face seemed extremely disturbed. Somebody was standing at the elevators, already waiting for one. It was just Elian, one of our techs. I hadn't noticed him leave before us. "I got an elevator coming," he said with a little smile. Even though the apartment building was a 300 cube, it had an old-style cable elevator, and they came with the frequency of subway trains. Thanks to Elian's thoughtfulness, one was arriving just now. I gave Karen a friendly smile. "Don't worry, nobody's going to hurt you. You're completely safe." She managed to gasp a couple of words, which I barely heard. "Elian. He." There. She had known another of our names. How was this possible? It was hard to sort through the implications. Did she have access to our records? Maybe dispatch was wrong about how she got disconnected. The elevator let out a ding and the doors opened. There was barely enough room inside for the gurney, me, and the 3 techs. Elian stood on the other side of the gurney from me. I looked him over as the doors closed and the elevator began to descend. Was she saying that this guy put a poison pellet in her? It was strange that he would be a part of her narrative. Very strange. I didn't know much about this guy beyond his name, but I had worked with him a few times. He was just one of the rotating techs, young guy, military hair, and goatee. Skinny but pretty fit. I wondered how he would be in a fight. These younger guys had so much supplementing. It was hard to tell. Elian caught me looking at him and gave me a bit of a surly look. For some reason, this irritated me. "So, friend, you trying to get out of here before the rest of us? Got a date or something?" I asked, needling him. "I was just getting the elevator," he said quietly. He didn't seem to like the banter. Well, whatever. I looked down at Karen and noticed something. A small red spot on the white sheet that covered her arm. Blood. It must have been from where they took her blood. Who took it? Elian? The spot was really too low on the arm for that. Odd. I thought of taking a look at it, but one of the most important protocols when dealing with occupants was not to act like you believe their delusions, even for a moment. You must insist on the reality of reality. I realized that Elian was watching me. I casually looked over to the elevator panel to see what floor we were on. 238. Man, this fucking thing was slow. What was the deal with that spot? It wouldn't be out of place for me to wonder about some patient bleeding. I lifted the sheet and took a look. There was a small puncture wound a few inches above her wrist. How'd she get that? I asked. One of the techs just muttered about not knowing. Elian didn't even look at the spot. His face was blank, unreadable. I touched her arm and felt a small nodule under the skin, about an inch from the wound. Huh. Interesting. I stood there trying to process this, caught between two realities. Was I in an elevator on a routine call with a stable client and a few techs who were just ordinary acquaintances? Or was I in an elevator with a murderer and a woman on the brink of death? There was really no way to split the difference on this one. No course of action that would work for both cases. Fuck. What was I even asking myself? There was no way. Simply no way. Stuff like that never happens in real life. But it happens in the feeds all the time. It's a 100% typical spy narrative bullshit. How could I let myself get caught up in some feed fantasy so easily? But still, a nodule under the skin. There was no good explanation for that. Elian turned to me. We looked at each other for a long, silent moment. I couldn't read the expression on his face. It wasn't chummy goodwill. Whatever it was. I felt a twinge in my stomach, and my body began flooding with adrenaline. I could feel it radiating out into my limbs. Fuck. My time in the Marines had taught me many things, many of them useless in the normal world. Many of them useless outside of a bar or cat house. But one of the more useful ones was that I should trust my adrenal gland. It meant that my paranoid lizard brain understood something that my snotty intellect was too busy to notice. It happened when things were too quiet, when a certain car kept following the convoy, when somebody was acting funny. There, in the elevator, I almost reached for the grip of my rifle. I wasn't wearing a rifle, of course, so I just scratched my chest, trying to keep my fingers loose. Elian put his hand to his hip. Just like that, I was leaping across the gurney. I grabbed his wrist with both hands, but it was at an awkward angle. With me splayed over the gurney, I had no control. A silver pistol came out of his pants, still halfway in its holster. "Help! Get him!" I shouted as I slid off the other side of the gurney towards Elian's feet, holding onto that wrist for dear life. I heard shouting everywhere, but nobody helped me, and nobody got him. Now I was on the floor, wrestling with Elian. There was a lot of awful, terrified fumbling. 4 hands were grabbing and clawing for the pistol. Somehow my head was jammed between Elian's shoulder and the wall, and I couldn't even see the gun. I could just feel the metal. There was a shot, painfully loud. Elian shouted. Was I hit? Now the gun was wet. I managed to wiggle my fingers around the grip. With one huge twisting jerk, I put the muzzle against Elian's face. "No," he shouted. I pulled the trigger. A shot, and his head kicked back against the wall. The mouth popping open, Everything went still. His hands were still holding mine.